So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the Red Deal before we get into comments from my comrades who are here on the panel tonight. So the Red Deal began in late 2018, early 2019. Many of our comrades in the Red Nation sat down and we read the Green New Deal. Those of you who've read the Green New Deal know that it's quite short, the version that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez introduced to Congress. And we had also read the Indigenous Environmental Network's response, asking for the Green New Deal to sort of strengthen its language about keeping it in the ground, right? This is language about keeping fossil fuels in the ground, coming from frontline Indigenous struggles against climate change and resource extraction. And we noticed that Indigenous people were mentioned twice in the Green New Deal in relationship to environmental racism, right? The disproportionate impact of resource extraction and pollution, which exacerbates, of course, climate change, and then also treaties. And so what we wanted to do was we wanted to build off of the Green New Deal, but we thought that it really needed to be expanded and there needed to be a more comprehensive vision and a program for liberation and political action and change than what was offered. And so we decided to write the Red Deal. And for us, this was really important because Ocasio-Cortez actually states, right, that she got her start for her successful bid for Congress at Standing Rock during the No DAPL uprising of 2016 and early 2017. And so it was important for us to remind people in the Red Deal, right, that it's actually the movements themselves, Indigenous movements for decolonization and liberation, that create the possibility for change in the first place. It's not necessarily appealing to ruling class politicians. And so we wanted to take this movement-based orientation and we wanted to expand it and make a much more sort of comprehensive vision to find that alternative, right, to what's usually on offer when we're talking about climate justice. And the other thing that we wanted to do, there are two other things we wanted to do with the Red Deal. We wanted to indigenize, right? We wanted to indigenize this platform. Speaking about treaties and passing in the Green New Deal was a good start. But in fact, we talk with expertise, right? Because the conversation about treaties and the work on treaties in the history of Native American studies has been one of the very pillars. And it's always treaty rights. Being a treaty defender has always been at the center of Indigenous demands for decolonization and liberation. And so for us, treaties aren't just made between human beings, treaties are also made with our other than human relatives, the earth, the water, the plants, right? The notion that water protectors and land defenders are acting as good relatives, right? That this was sort of the ethics behind what we wanted to do when we were indigenizing the Green New Deal. And the third thing is we were drawing really centrally from the 2011 Global Conference on Climate Change and the Rights of Mother Earth that was held in Cochabamba, Bolivia. And this was a counter summit in response to the April 2010 failure, right, of the COP15 climate summit in Copenhagen. And what the plurinational government of Bolivia wanted to do at that time, right, was to convene Indigenous people through an explicitly anti-imperialist and anti-capitalist agenda. And so it was very Indigenous, right? It was very anti-imperialist and it was an anti-capitalist approach to how we should be reducing carbon emissions and how we should be addressing climate justice that didn't have anything to do with recentering the voices, right, of the global North countries that emit the most carbon, right, compared to global South, often offload the burden of that onto global South countries like Bolivia and also onto Indigenous nations. But then also that those ruling class politicians, right, were trying and are continuing, Biden's climate summit was today, are continuing to try to find solutions that are consistent with maintaining the unequal relations of development and exploitation and extraction that make capitalism possible. So green capitalism is something that they rejected at the Cochabamba meeting of 2011, and it's something we wholesale reject as well in the Red Deal. And so these are some of the pillars of the Red Deal. One other thing that we wanted to do in the Red Deal was we really wanted to respond as Indigenous people. Oftentimes I think the Indigenous struggle is considered an analog for the environment, right? This idea that Native people are like one with nature, right? We hug trees or, we have some sort of like mystical relation, like avatar like relationship. But we're very serious about, a revolutionary struggle and what it means to build a political program for that type of revolution. And as Indigenous people, we think that our environmental justice struggles and our struggles for climate justice must also be responsive to the demands for abolition that are coming historically, right, from the Black Lives Matter movement and the movement for Black lives. And so the Red Nation, right, was founded in late 2014, right as Ferguson was popping off the next year. And so as an organization, we have grown up and our politics have developed alongside Black Lives Matter, right? Alongside demands to defund the police last year after George Floyd was murdered. And so we really center an abolitionist sort of formula in the Red Deal where we say, you need to divest from the institutions that cause the greatest harm on behalf of the state, right? Prisons, police, the military, and divesting from those institutions, we must reinvest in the common dignity of all, which means healing our bodies and healing our earth, which are the last two parts of the Red Deal. And what we're saying, what is, right, the common dignity of all? It has to do with a program for healthcare, universal healthcare, right? Right now, it has to do with universal COVID-19 vaccines for free for everyone throughout the world, especially the global South. It has to do with free universal education. It has to do with free universal accessible transportation, right? It has to do with everyone deserving not just a house, but a home, right? Especially Indigenous people. We are on our own homelands, yet we are dispossessed of our right to make home on our own homelands. And so this is what we talk about in the Red Deal. This is the larger vision. As we argue in the book, there is no shortage of resources. The resources that exist are simply hoarded by the ruling class, people like Joe Biden, right? And the multinational corporations that continue to plunder the earth. And we need to seize those resources and redistribute them as part of this larger vision, right? Part of this larger vision to address climate change, to have climate justice. And finally, before I turn it over to my comrades, we see land back. Land back is kind of the rallying cry right now for Indigenous movements on the ground. That land back, actual land back, treaty lands especially, in the hands of Indigenous people and Indigenous nations to caretake and to steward those lands is the soundest environmental policy to stop climate disaster that the United States and all other settler nations could possibly be pursuing in this moment. We are 5% of the world's population, yet we caretake 80% of the world's biodiversity, including places like the Amazon rainforest, which is literally the lungs of the world. You can trust something we say in the Red Deal. You can trust Indigenous people. We've been fighting this struggle against US imperialism and capitalism for 500 years. We have all of the knowledge and all of the experience, and we're already doing the work. It's simply not recognized or it's silenced in mainstream organizing. And so the Red Deal is an unapologetic and an emphatic sort of Indigenous manifesto in a way about listen to us, right? Listen to us. We are the leaders already, especially Indigenous women on the front lines.